talking about my 10 favorite Star Wars characters. Now, I actually don't know if I've talked too much on this channel about my Star Wars fandom, maybe a little bit. I mean, eagle-eyed viewers, you'll see that I have a lightsaber tattoo, the Skywalker lightsaber tattoo, on my forearm. I guess I did do a Battlefront video quite a long time ago. I think I did a Knights of the Old Republic video at one point. But beyond that, no, I have not really talked about it. But yeah, growing up, I was a massive Star Wars fan when I was really young. One of the first movies I remember watching, and I don't even know in what context I saw the film, because none of my other family members, like, my parents aren't really Star Wars fans, my brothers, no. So I don't think I would have been watching it with my family, but I was young, probably around 5, 6, 7, something like that. And I saw Return of the Jedi. So Return of the Jedi was actually the very first Star Wars film I ever saw. And that's why, even though I know a lot of people dislike Return of the Jedi, personally for me, I've always had a soft spot for that movie. It's probably my second favorite Star Wars movie. My favorite is Empire Strikes Back. Then I'd probably go Return of the Jedi. Then I would do Revenge of the Sith, A New Hope, Rogue One, Force Awakens, Phantom Menace, Last Jedi, Solo, Attack the Clones, Rise of Skywalker. Probably how I would do it. I feel like I'm missing something. That's just off the top of my head, but anyways. And back when I worked at the Adidas warehouse in Portland, I had a co-worker who was also a very big Star Wars fan. And while we were on the warehouse floor unpacking stuff, we'd go back and forth trying to stump each other with increasingly obscure Star Wars lore. And over the years, I've read so many of the Legends books. Well, now the Legends used to be called Expanded Universe books. Over the last probably decade or so, I have fallen off of it a bit. I'm not as invested in the universe as I used to be. Since they made the Expanded Universe into Legends, and they introduced the new canon, I have not read any of the new books, except for one. I actually don't know if it's considered canon or not, but I read that book, Master and Apprentice, which is about Qui-Gon, Jinn, and Obi-Wan Kenobi. But I haven't read any of the new High Republic books, even though, in my opinion, the High Republic books look very interesting. I just haven't found the time or motivation to jump into them yet. But anyways, over the years of watching Star Wars, reading, my 10 favorite characters, now I have a proclivity towards Force users. I just find them more interesting, Jedi and Sith, all that stuff. So that is going to be a majority of this list. But we're going to start with number 10. Obviously, where all these lists start is at the bottom. And this is going to be the only sequel trilogy character on this list, but Poe Dameron. Poe my opinion, Poe is the most interesting character from the the Disney trilogy of films. I guess I can see the argument for why you would think Kylo Ren is a more interesting character, and to a certain extent I get it, because I feel like a lot of Poe was left on the cutting room floor. But I think Poe's a very interesting character. I've always liked the starfighter, the starpilot characters. What was that video game for GameCube? Was it Rogue Starfighter? I think that was the name of the game. And I was really disappointed when the news broke that Patty Jenkins' Starfighter, I forget what it was going to be called, but the Rogue Squadron, I think, Rogue Squadron movie was canceled, because I was really looking forward to that, because we had Rogue One, which was kind of like a World War II, like war movie set in the Star Wars universe, which is a really cool thing, and Rogue One is probably, a lot of people have it as one of their favorite Star Wars movies. I don't like it as much as some people do, but definitely of the newer crop of Star Wars products, I think it's near the top, if not at the very top. But I was really looking forward to that movie, because I just find, doing a dogfighting movie, but in space with spaceships, that's something that's really appealing to me. That was the project I was most excited for when that slate of upcoming Star Wars films got announced, but hearing that it got canceled was really disappointing. But I've always liked those sorts of characters, like Empire at War, that game, like maneuvering your ships, and I just found Poe Dameron a really cool character. I liked his confidence. He was jokey at times without being too much of a comedic relief character. Besides the whole they fly now portion, of course, but I feel like they could have done a lot more with this character, but I really liked him. Number 9, now we have a character at number 9 who appeared in Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, a game that is really only good and playable if you have the cut content mod installed. But that is Darth Nihilus. And just as a spoiler, because I know a lot of people might be upset, as I'm just going to soften the blow now. This is the only Old Republic character on this list. I don't have Revan, I don't have anybody else on this list. Darth Nihilus. Now, I know a lot of people kind of talk a little bit of smack about Darth Nihilus. They say, like, oh, he's just like edgy, type character, like, try hard, edgy. I disagree. I understand where they're coming from with that take, but I personally disagree. I love the whole, like, the hunger, and he has to continue to destroy and feed off of, force energy and physical matter more and more to keep his body together. Because he doesn't even have, like, a physical form anymore. He's incorporeal. He's just this living force being of anger and hate. And I know now, like, I don't know, I understand the criticism. People say, like, maybe it's like try-hard edgelord stuff. But I think the way they handled it is really interesting and cool, and I think he's a very scary character that kind of goes into the horror elements a bit that Star Wars dips its toe into in the expanded universe that we haven't seen in any of the mainline products. Like, we've never seen, and we'll probably never see, the Yuuzhan Vong on screen in the new canon books, because the Yuuzhan Vong are very scary. Although I agree with a lot of the criticisms that say they became too prevalent in the books, and a lot of the EU writers relied too heavily on the Yuuzhan Vong as antagonists. But when they were first introduced, and when they're used in a limited capacity as your primary antagonist, they're an absolutely terrifying force. Terrifying enemy because they are invisible to the Force, they're immune to the Force. So the greatest weapon of the Jedi is nullified. And then you also had things in EU like Abeloth, just being a pure evil, and things like that you don't really see in the video games or in the films or TV series. So Darth and Nihilus is sort of the closest we got to those horror elements that some of the expanded universe Star Wars books and stuff and comics and things would touch on. Number 8, Aayla Secura. Aayla Secura now, I think part of this as well is going back to my introduction to Star Wars with Return of the Jedi. In Return of the Jedi, you have Luke. You see the Twi'lek slaves and stuff like that with Jabba. And the Twi'leks are obviously visually very distinct on camera compared to any other, obviously you have all the alien species and things like that, notably like Greedo and things like that, but the Twi'leks, they have the long tubes, antennas, I figured they're called in universe, and they're all blue, whereas like a lot of the other aliens are like green or brown. And I believe when the movies were made, they were only female. It was a species of only females. But obviously now, as the canon has shifted, there are male Twi'leks. But at the time, it's only this female alien race. So visually, as a kid, I thought the Twi'leks were very interesting. Just watching the movies. And then you come to the prequel trilogy, and one of them is a Jedi. I'm not gonna lie, being the age I was when I saw the prequels, I'm like, oh, it's a very attractive woman as well, which helps. But then, when you dig into the expanded universe a bit, especially some of the comics that came out, I think predominantly that's where a lot of this comes from. And you learn about Aayla Secura's backstory. Her being kidnapped and brainwashed by her father when she was a Jedi apprentice, having amnesia, having to be rescued, and then having to relearn how to be a Jedi and stuff, and all of this happens before the events that we see on screen, obviously. Coming back to the Jedi Temple, and then training under Plo Koon, who is probably an honorable mention on this list, doesn't quite crack my top 10, but I do love me some Plo Koon. Aayla Secura, if you look into the actual lore beyond the films, is a very, very interesting character with sort of a tragic backstory. And I love, her design is very interesting, so design-wise, I think she's, very unique. And then also in the Force Unleashed video game, I think it is the first one, not the second one, you have a fight with Aayla Secura, which was a very fun and unique boss fight. You're on this sort of jungle planet, and I don't know how they explained it. Maybe she survived somehow, Order 66, because in the films we see her die, but I remember that boss fight being very good as well. Number 7, we come to the smoothest man in the galaxy, Lando Calrissian. Now obviously the Billy D. Williams adaptation is the original and the best version of Lando Calrissian. But, this might be an unpopular opinion. I liked Donald Glover's portrayal as Lando. I loved that yellow outfit that he had at one point in the film. I thought he really did good with the character. Honestly, I kind of liked Solo. Like, I didn't like it enough to, rank it highly, but I know some people really banned Solo, and I'm sure if I went back and watched it again, I'd probably like it less. But I actually remember not hating that movie as much as other people did, and I didn't dislike the main guy who played Han Solo. And I did like Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian. I did. But Lando is just such an interesting character to me because he's very similar to Han Solo. I prefer him to Han Solo. Han Solo is not on this list. But whereas Han Solo kind of has this cynical, very cool and self-assured nature, Lando is, he's a little bit more humorous, upbeat, funny, charismatic. And that's not to say Han Solo isn't charismatic, but Han Solo is charismatic in the way that Harrison Ford is a very attractive man who is, is being charismatic in that regard. It's not to say Billy D. Williams isn't, a good-looking guy, but he was more of that, smooth talking, kind of reminds me of, a lounge singer type guy. And I've always loved that vibe. He reminds me of, the Rat Pack or something. You would see Lando Calrissian down in Vegas being a crooner. And I've always loved that vibe, that era. So for that reason, Lando Calrissian is number 7. Number 6 on my list, we have Din Djarin, otherwise most commonly known as the Mandalorian, your main protagonist of the Mandalorian TV series. Of course, Pedro Pascal, amazing actor. And I have to admit, going into The Mandalorian when Season 1 first came out back in 2016 or 2017, whatever it was, I was very skeptical. Because I think part of it is honestly my experience going to Comic-Cons and dealing with the sort of people that dress up in Mandalorian armor. And I was expecting a lot of fan service stuff and just sort of, I don't know, I didn't have high hopes. But then I watched Season 1 of The Mandalorian and Season 2 of The Mandalorian were both very good. I did not like the most recent season. I didn't like Book of Boba Fett. It feels like it's gone downhill a bit, but the first 2 seasons are really solid. I think bringing Ahsoka Tano and Luke Skywalker into the mix, as cool as it was at the time, was a bad move for the property. But, the whole characterization, his calm under pressure, all the different gadgets and weapons he has, his survival instincts, plus, his backstory and just his characterization, Din Djarin, immediately jumped into being one of my favorite Star Wars characters. But now we get into our top 5, and fair warning right here, top 5, all Jedi and Sith. So all these guys are going to be wielding lightsabers and using the Force. At number 5, we have the best duelist of his era, maybe one of the best pure duelists of all time, especially if you get into the Clone Wars cartoon, some of the expanded universe stuff, even the canon stuff, and that is Count Dooku. And obviously this is certainly helped with the fact that he was portrayed by Sir Christopher Lee, one of my favorite actors of all time, a veteran of stage and screen, obviously, Dracula, Saruman, so many great characters and performances, and Christopher Lee was himself an accomplished saber duelist. So he gets that iconic curved hilt lightsaber, which I've always loved. I've always wanted to get a lightsaber that curved hilt. using that single hand saber stance, the way he flourishes his saber, very reminiscent of European sword martial arts, HEMA type stuff. And so unique and interesting, and I love that, I saw this person do a scene breakdown of how good of a duelist Count Dooku is. He was doing a duel, himself versus Qui-Gon Jinn and Anakin Skywalker, and this is in the Clone Wars cartoon. Now, Anakin has a very offensive, aggressive lightsaber style, and Obi-Wan is a master of Sorizu, the defensive lightsaber style. Pure defense. And Count Dooku, because of how good of a duelist he is, knows this, and he is relentlessly attacking Anakin, a flurry of blows, striking him from every angle, forcing Anakin to fight on the back foot, forcing him to be on the defense, and chasing him, pushing him back, which is forcing Obi-Wan to be the aggressor against Dooku, because Dooku's taking the fight to Anakin, so Obi-Wan is the extra man, so he has to go on the attack. So Dooku is like 4D chess. He's like, okay, Anakin, you're better at offense. I'm gonna force you into defense. And Obi-Wan, the way you win duels is by blocking everything and waiting for an opening. You have to come attack me, something you're not comfortable doing. And that scene right there, in my mind, just perfectly encapsulates what I love about Count Dooku. He's not the best at the Force. He didn't allow himself. He got tricked by the Emperor. He got used as a pawn by the Emperor. But he was still one of the best duelists that's ever lived. Number 4, Qui-Gon Jinn. I love me some Qui-Gon Jinn. I love me some Liam Neeson's. But I love some Qui-Gon Jinn, and he did not used to be this high on my list. I probably would have had him down near, in the 8 to 10 region. That Master and Apprentice book that I referenced earlier, it's all about Qui-Gon Jinn being a master to an apprentice, Obi-Wan Kenobi, before the events of The Phantom Menace. So it's a prequel to the prequels book. And that book massively made me go up on Qui-Gon Jinn. First of all, I'm a huge fan of green lightsabers. Again, I think that comes from Return of the Jedi being my first Star Wars movie. So, if a Jedi is a green lightsaber, they get a little bit of a bump in my book. But I love the way Qui-Gon is kind of the OG gray Jedi. He doesn't blindly agree with what the Council is saying. He is not a zealot in the way that some of the other Jedi are. He doesn't believe that the Jedi are infallible. He is a free thinker in a time in the Star Wars universe where the Jedi were not encouraged to be free thinkers. And he rubbed the Council the wrong way. He made enemies in high places. But he was just unabashedly himself, and he was such a strong and powerful duelist. He wasn't extremely skilled in any one, sort of, way of fighting or anything, but he just was overall very good, very strong Jedi Master. So number 3, we're going into our top 3 now, and that's a character that before recently would have been number 2 on my list. But again, that Master and Apprentice book, as well as just some recent change of thoughts, have changed things for me. But number 3, my third favorite character, is Darth Vader. Darth Vader specifically, after the armor goes on, not so much the Anakin Skywalker era. But there's just so much. I mean, even beyond the films, even if you just only look at the films, because so much here I'm referencing Legends material, the cartoons, whatever, but even if you just look at the films and TV series, obviously you have the original trilogy where he's the main villain, even though he's really not, but he is. And then you have the whole build-up in Revenge of the Sith, and you seeing him fall to the dark side, because you know how it ends, which makes it all the more tragic, because there's still that part of you that is hoping he can avoid it and resist it, even though you know that's not possible. But then obviously you have Rogue One, the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series, which I liked better than most people seem to have. I really loved that show, especially the ending. Go into, but now let's reference the other material, the comic books. All I see before me are Dead Men, that very iconic comic book panel where he's staring down like hundreds of soldiers and he kills all of them by himself. All the novels, all of the expansion we got upon the lore of Darth Vader and all the things he did being a Jedi hunter and all this other stuff, and these incredible feats that he did in the expanded universe. I just started not to put him here. He's one of the most iconic villains in the history of cinema, in the history of fiction. You know, his armor is iconic, referential of samurai warlords, and easy number 3 here for me. Number 2 is Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think for me, it's just I come to realize Obi-Wan Kenobi is the perfect Jedi. Even more than Luke, he is the perfect Jedi. He fully believes in the mission statement. It's like when you meet a religious person. This might be like this might be a controversial comment, but it's like when you meet a religious person who actually believes it and follows the rules and the tenets of that religion and isn't just using it like, because they're a cultural practice or something like that, but like they're actually a true believer. And you're like, oh wow, like you're actually about this. That is Obi-Wan Kenobi to me. Even though, like I said, the Jedi are clearly flawed and they obviously have a lot of issues. There's corruption, they're blind to the obvious misgivings going on around them. Obi-Wan Kenobi is still a true believer and he acts like it. And he's the perfect defensive swordsman. Nobody can penetrate his defenses unless he allows them to. See, when he allows Darth Vader to kill him. And it's just, in my mind, he is, like I said, the perfect Jedi, and a very interesting character, because he is a character with little moral ambiguity in a world with a lot of darkness, a lot of grayness, a lot of moral ambiguity. Obi-Wan Kenobi is not ambiguous whatsoever in his morals. He is steadfast in his beliefs. Even at one point, denying himself romance, because that's what a Jedi is meant to do. Contrast that with Anakin Skywalker, who becomes Darth Vader because of love, which he's not permitted to have, according to the doctrine of the Jedi. And finally, my favorite Star Wars character, and I promise this one's gonna probably surprise you guys. You might be thinking Luke Skywalker here. I don't know who else you might be thinking for this spot. Actually, maybe Yoda, the Emperor, Darth Maul, maybe some of you are thinking. I promise, unless maybe I've mentioned this somewhere else, you're not gonna get this one. My favorite Star Wars character is Kit Fisto. Kit Fisto, the Neimoidian Jedi. Now, Kit Fisto in the films is a bit of a jobber. Okay, especially in episode 3, he's a bit of a jobber. But the Clone Wars, and I'm talking specifically, and I don't know how to find these anymore because there's been like 3 or 4 cartoons now just named the Clone Wars. But when I was a kid, Cartoon Network had these like 5-minute animated episodes called the Clone Wars with a very cool and unique art style. And there was one of them where it was Kit Fisto underwater with his underwater lightsaber. And it was one of the coolest things I have ever seen in my entire life. And I still try and watch that clip sometimes, but like I said, I struggle to find it. And he doesn't get a lot of love in the property. I think he featured in one of the Expanded Universe novels, but it was a really bad book. He wasn't in it that much. But I've always loved his design. He's so different looking than any other sort of alien in the universe. And I love that he breathes water. He can fight underwater. He has the underwater lightsaber. He's like Aquaman, but a Jedi. I don't even think there's really any logical reason behind it, but ever since I was like young, I've just seen Kit Fisto, and I've been like, that's my guy right there. So anyways, those were my top 10 favorite Star Wars characters. Let me know in the comments down below who your favorite characters are. I'd love to hear any and all feedback, but if you liked the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this almost every single day. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.